Thor's early life. We're talking about Thor today. We know that Thor Love and Thunder is out soon. I thought it'd be really helpful to go back in time a little bit and look at where he came from. It's been a long time since the first Thor movie was released. I think it was 2011. And so he's been on a long journey since then. Let's go back. This will be one part of many. Let's really look at his family dynamic and how his identity has been formed. The eagle-eyed amongst you will know that I just went live about half an hour ago, this very same topic, but I am a perfectionist and very self-critical, and it just didn't feel right. So I thought, let's trust my intuition and let's have a take two. And as I did that, I thought, God, it all of a sudden looks really dark. It's only 7 o'clock at night here. And I realized it was pouring down with rain. I shit you not. And it looks like it's a storm. So I think that's confirmation from the actual deity Thor that take two is a good idea. I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but would it be amazing if we get some thunder while we're on live? I've got the window open just here, so maybe you can hear the rain. But either way, it has been hot as the hobs of hell today. It's been hot as Surtur's butt cheeks, so we definitely need the rain. Anyway, we're going to talk about Thor's early life, and we're going to focus on the first Thor movie. But if this is your first time here, welcome to Love and Fandom, where we believe the relationships we see on the screen help us to understand ourselves at a deeper level and have a better relationship with ourselves and each other. I'm Cheryl Muir. I'm a relationship expert. I'm a certified coach. I've been coaching since 2014, which is 8 years, and I help people to find love after a lifetime of fantasy relationship patterns. And a lot of the work I do today is helping fangirls to find love. So we can definitely look at these characters as a way to understand ourselves, and sometimes we can go too far with it and it gets in the way of finding relationships. So you have to decide what that is for you. Quick announcement. This was just announced a couple of days ago. It was just announced this week. I have a brand new free training specific to fangirling and for fangirls by a former fangirl. Still I'm a fangirl a little bit. And the free training is called Fandom Fangirl Obsession Decoded. It's so new, I can't even remember the name yet. And it takes you through a 3-day process to understand your obsession with a fictional character or a celebrity and really understand what was driving that. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, the information is down below in the description. So without further ado, let's crack on and talk about Thor's family drama, the Odinsons family drama. So let's look at the family system that Thor comes from first. It's kind of fucked up. And I've always looked at this from the perspective of Loki, because he's the one I really relate to the most, and maybe you can as well, in seeing him kind of be the odd one out, be left out a little bit, be cast aside, feel different. We find out why that is later. But when you also look at this from Thor's perspective, he didn't have it that easy either. So let me explain to you how I see his family set up and the roles different people are playing and the role that Thor is forced into and what that might have done for him, his psyche, the way he views himself and how he relates to other people and himself in the world, and why he might be a little bit arrogant and cocky, particularly at the start of the first Thor movie. So he's in the type of family system that we often see in families with narcissism, with addiction, with someone that has a really serious either issue or personality disorder, illness, ailment, mental health issue, maybe something completely through no fault of their own. But in those family systems, that person becomes like a sun in a solar system, and everyone else orbits around them. And everyone else is forced into a role. Usually there is a caretaker or a rescuer. In this case, it's Frigga. I don't think she does an enormous amount of rescuing, but she's definitely taken on a very, very nurturing role. She is a very nurturing woman and fabulous queen of Asgard, but also is very nurturing and loving towards her sons. She does seem to be that way naturally. And I also theorize that she is basically making up for Odin being the worst. So there's usually a caretaker or a rescuer. In this case, it's Frigga. And then there's usually a golden child and a scapegoat. We've got Thor and Loki next. Can you tell which is which? Loki is the scapegoat. He has everything blamed on him. He's kind of shunned and he always feels different. They're like, no, Loki, we don't see you as different. And then they're like, oh, by the way, spoiler, we rescued you from a frozen rock in Jotunheim. Like, why did they not tell him? It's ridiculous. Lies are very common in family systems like this. There's these family secrets, these family lies. Some people know some secrets, others know the other ones. Don't tell them. I'm going to speak to Sally over here about why Dave is upset, and we're not going to talk to each other. I'm just going to gossip to this person over here, this very triangulating thing. Thor obviously didn't know about Loki's lineage and his parentage, but there's these secrets kept within the family. Only Thor and Frigga know. They keep it from the boys. It's messed up. So we know Loki is the scapegoat. That means that Thor is the golden child. Now, for me, as feeling someone that played the role of scapegoat in a family dynamic, and maybe you have as well, it's easy to empathize with the scapegoat because they've been dealt a pretty bad hand. But with the golden child, they're put up on this pedestal. They're expected to be perfect. They're given love and time and affection and attention for what they do, for what they produce. So with Thor, that looks like, being the future king of Asgard, being the golden son with the long golden hair and everything else. The way he looks, the way he dresses, everything's very regal, very theatrical. And his power and his status and his future as the king of Asgard is what makes him worthy. This subject of worthiness comes up a lot. Strength and power. That's what makes him worthy. That is what he is told. And so where was I going? I've lost my train of thought there, but that's okay. We're just going to rewind. We're talking about worthiness and conditions of worth. So basically, Thor's given this condition of worth, like you are worthy because of this. That's very typical with a golden child, and what that can look like in real life. That's where I was going to go with that. Thank you, brain. What that can look like in real life is if you or one of your siblings was a member of the family that did really well in school, or was the star athlete, or a really fantastic musician, and that was celebrated by your family, that's golden child kind of shit. And what that makes us believe is that I'm only worthy when I'm doing this, this, and this. I think it was Carl Rogers who invented the model conditions of worth. And he basically theorizes that we have these different conditions of being loved. I will be loved when I'm perfect. I will be loved when I'm helping other people. I will be loved when I do this, this, and this. So certainly for Thor, it's I'm loved and I'm worthy because of my status, because of my power, because of my strength, because of my position as a warrior. It's interesting to me how we see a completely different perspective in Thor Love Thunder. He's trying to learn who he is without all of that. And I love that we're going in that direction. He seems very free. He's wearing completely different clothing. He seems to be having a jolly good time, and we love to see it, especially after what Thor went through in Endgame. I talk about it in this video above if you want me to really break down what happened to him in Endgame and what we see from him, and how Korg supported him through that. We love Korg. He's a good friend to Thor. He's Thor's secure base throughout that whole trauma in Endgame, or Infinity War into Endgame. So is there anything else I want to tell you about his role within his family? Let me look at my notes. So so he's basically valued for what he does and not for who he is. So that could be something for you to look at, right? If you were in a family where you were valued for what you do and not who you are, what impact has that had on you today? And also, if you find yourself not knowing what your true purpose is and finding it hard to break away from what's expected of you, so that might be in your career or in the type of family you have, or the type of way you dress even, or the way you speak, or I've mentioned career, what else is that? The family you choose, the partners you choose. If there's this thought of an adult of what will my parents think, what will my family say, or you meet someone new, you start dating someone new, and in the back of your mind it's, yeah, but when I introduce them to my family, is something going to go wrong? That's a sign that something's gone on earlier on in life, where parents have had this thing of you need to be perfect and we need to approve of all the things you do, and you're only worthy if you do this, this, and this, and do it our way. Thor, turns out, didn't want to be king. So if you feel like you're someone who has to be perfect and your worth is tied to what you do and not who you are, it might be worth looking at what the origin of that is, and it might be what we talked about just now. So before we go on to point number 2, which is about banishment, his banishment to Midgard after the trials and tribulations on Jotunheim, let's talk really quickly about the arrogance and cockiness we see from Thor at the start of the movie. We know that's his whole arc. He goes from being cocky to being humble and helping the humans, and we know that's his arc in Thor 1. But from the perspective of this family, it's not surprising. In fact, it's inevitable that he would be like that. In this family system that seems very similar to a narcissistic family dynamic, usually those family systems produce either codependent people and people who have crippling self-doubt, like Loki. Loki's not really codependent, though he is in the series. The Loki series in Disney Plus, TVA Loki, is very codependent, but he is filled with crippling self-doubt. So those kinds of family systems produce those kinds of people, or they produce narcissists. The way that Thor's arc goes, he's not narcissistic, but he certainly could have gone down that route, particularly in the way that we see him presented at the start of the first Thor movie. It's because this happens because someone's been placed on a pedestal, and at the same time they've not been like emotionally nourished. He certainly wasn't by his father anyway. So it sort of fills your head full of air of feeling like you're better than everyone else, but you also feel like crap. It reminds me of that lyric by Marina and the Diamonds. It's an old song now. I'm aging myself, but it says, I feel like I'm the worst, so I always act like I'm the best. That's the type of people that it produces often. Very cocky, but feel like crap on the inside. And that shows up in Thor and Loki in slightly different ways, but it's definitely there. A+ parenting from Odin Wurswala. Point number 2, banishment. So we know that Thor was reckless on Jotunheim, but it's interesting to me that what Thor was replicating what he saw as a child Odin doing. We know Odin is war hungry. This is confirmed in Ragnarok, right? With the mosaic that Hela brings down. So obviously there's this dynamic on Asgard where being a warrior is respected. We know this. There's lots of digs at Loki for knowing his magic. Does that happen in canon, or have I read too much fan fiction? I'm pretty sure it's canon. But we know that Thor is well respected because he's a warrior, right? And there's this military presence on Asgard, the Einherjar, the guards, the army. You know, they're trained, they're respected. As Hela says in Ragnarok, where do you think all this gold came from? They fought for it. And so it's quite telling on Jotunheim when Odin rocks up. Thor's not worried about, oh shit, I'm going to be in trouble by my father. He's not flinching. He's going, Father, we'll finish them together. Why does he say that? He expects it. Why would he expect it? Because it's been normalized in his family. So what I'd like us to start thinking about is, where was that a thing in your family where it was one rule for someone and one rule for someone else? You saw something done and you replicated it and you were in trouble because someone was projecting. No, you can't do that. It's bad. Well, you do it. So why can't I do it? I don't understand. In these types of families that are really dysfunctional, we generally see this mixed messaging. It's very confusing. One thing's okay on one day, one thing's not okay on another day. We don't know where we are. And it creates very cautious adults, especially in relationships. Like, we're kind of treading on eggshells around people and trying to please people all the time, because we learned that was what we needed to do to survive. And we know 95% of the subconscious mind is formed before the age of 6. I don't know how that translates in Asgardian years. 6 would be what, if they're like 15, 16 in Thor 1, I think someone worked it out to be, they would be like 6 years old in Asgardian years would be like 300 or 400 years. Is that right? Someone please work that out for me. That's probably not correct. But either way, during their upbringing, Thor and Loki have seen how war is respected. So Thor goes and does that. Of course he's wrong. Of course he shouldn't have gone into Jotunheim and destroyed his brother's kind. Didn't know that at the time. Of course he was reckless. He was replicating what his father does. He's then brought back to Asgard with Loki and the Warriors 3. And then there's this really, really distressing scene where he's screamed at and he's stripped of his power and told he's unworthy. From the perspective of how Thor sees himself and his identity and how he fits in the world, think about, he's been told his whole life that his worth is directly correlated to his power, his strength, his status, and he's stripped of that and told, you are unworthy. That's going to fuck someone up. And we see how visibly upset he is. We see how upset Loki is at seeing all of this, right? I read something the other day about this, and it was a perspective on Loki's fear and how he's seeing what's happening to Thor. And you can see the wheels turning in his mind of, if this is what's happening to Thor for going to war on Jotunheim, what's going to happen to me for being an actual Jotun? What's going to happen next? Would Thor have killed me? Very, very confusing for Loki as well. But focusing on Thor, he's banished, right? Really, really messed up. Is there anything else? Sorry, I'm just pausing to look at my notes to see if there's anything else on the banishment piece. Basically, Thor is told that his worthiness is a shaky thing, that it's something that's not a constant, it's something that will change depending on what he does and who he is in the world. That's messed up. I suspect that's really common in lots of royal families, but certainly is in this Asgardian family. Let's jump now to point 3, Thor and the Mortals, and how easily he's able to make relationships and build relationships on Midgard. So despite Thor's upbringing being very rough and him being put on a pedestal as the golden child, Frigga really makes up for a lot of Odin's shortcomings, and she does that by being very nurturing. So when we have someone that comes from a family where, I'm just going to use the words good and bad, I know that's a bit binary, but it's just the easiest way to explain it. When we have a bad parent like Odin and we have a good parent like Frigga, it can go either way in terms of how you turn out. Sometimes I have clients come to me and they're like, I don't really understand why I struggle in relationships, because I had one parent that was really good, but what's happened in that situation is the parent that was really abusive, neglectful, etc., like Odin, that voice of that parent has become very loud in their mind. The impact of that has been huge for them. But in other people, and I don't generally talk to these people because they don't come to me as clients, but they might have had one bad parent and one good parent, but the impact of the good parent was so strong that that almost cancels out the voice of the bad parent. So it really depends. It can go either way. But it's worth just looking at which parent had the most impact on you. And a question you can ask is, whose love did I crave the most? You probably know all of this from therapy anyway, and obviously I'm a coach, not a therapist, but what I tend to do with my clients is feel this. They already know it, they already understand it, but feeling is healing. And healing and feeling is what it looks like Thor's going to do a lot of in Thor Love and Thunder. So looking forward to seeing that explored in the movie. So he is able to form relationships quickly on Midgard in this different realm. He doesn't even know where he is when he wakes up, you know. Then there's that whole dialogue with Darcy about him saying, which realm is this? Is it Alfheim, Niflheim? And she says New Jersey. And he's like, don't you dare threaten me. And there's that whole thing. He doesn't even know where he is and quite quickly starts to form relationships with these humans. So it's Frigga's positive influence that's done that. The fourth and final point I want to talk about is his relationship with his brother at the end of the film. I suppose I should do a separate video on Thor and Loki because that, it seems worthy of a video all unto itself, and this video isn't really on their dynamic as such. It's more about their parents. But what happens at the end of the film, I don't think this is a spoiler, I think we've all seen it, but we see Loki choose to let go of Gungnir, of Odin's spear. I saw this described in a very, very articulate and intelligent Tumblr post where they were saying how this is very symbolic, right? You've got Odin with 2 feet on Asgard. You've got Loki hanging on to the end, floating in this void. And you've got 2 things in the middle. You've got Thor torn between the 2, torn between his loyalty to the crown and the golden sham and Odin and Asgard. And then also torn between that and the love he has for his brother. And you also see the spear, Odin's spear, Gungnir, which is a symbol of the whole crown, right? And you see how this connects them all, but also creates distance between them all. That's not my analogy, it's the analogy of a very, very intelligent person on the Tumblr machine. So in that, we see Thor looking into his brother's eyes as his dad refuses to give his son, who's so traumatized and on the verge of ending it all. We see Thor witness that, and Loki's basically saying, just please give me some validation for once in my life and I'll be okay. And he just says, no, Loki, and he lets go. And it's, I want to cry thinking about that because it's so sad. And the real life version of that is, you know, having that parent or that member of your family that never gave you that validation. And I know that can be so hard, but the way that we heal that is we give that validation to ourselves now. So what is it that you wanted to hear from them? And how can you give that to yourself? And then what's really interesting is sometimes you can shift to a completely different version of your life where that member of your family, that parent, ends up giving you those things you always wanted when you don't need them anymore, because you're not coming from a place of neediness, and then they're freely giving you all the support you ever wanted. I've had that happen in my own life. It is quite an extraordinary thing. But all I want you to focus on at the moment is your inner dialogue today, the things that you're saying to yourself. If they're negative, it's probably not your voice, because we're not born talking to ourselves like crap. We learn it from somewhere, and it's usually from our family of origin. So if you look at Thor and Loki's self-talk, I mean, we know the types of things they say to themselves, and that's come from their family. So look at what that is for you. Instead of looking at these characters, let's look at ourselves and what are the things you're repeatedly saying to yourself. And is that something that was said to you when you were small, right? And what is it you needed to hear from them, and how can you say that to yourself today? And that becomes how we talk to ourselves, how we encourage ourselves through things, and becomes an important part of becoming someone who doesn't even look like half the things they've been through. So as I'm finishing up this video, I'm just praying for a little bit of lightning or thunder, because I think it'd be really, really cool. The sky is so dark outside, and it doesn't go dark till about 11 p.m. and it's now 20 to 8, and it's so dark that it's such a heavy storm. I thought we might get some thunder, but we didn't. That's okay. So those 4 points again are, we looked at the role within Thor's role within his family and his whole family dynamic, and who's playing what role, the kind of narcissistic role, the rescuer, or the caretaker, the scapegoat, and the golden child. We looked at his arrogance and cockiness and why that happens. We look at his banishment and what's said to him and how that touches on those conditions of worth. We also looked at how he's easily able to make relationships in Midgard because of the positive influence of his mother and that positive figure that she is for him. And then we also talked about Loki and the Bifrost and Gungnir and what happens at the end of the film, and how Thor is witness to Odin being the worst father at the worst possible time. So that is everything. If you need more from me, as I said, I have a free training, a Fangirl Obsession Decoded. The details are down below. If you enjoyed this, give me a like, leave a comment below, share the video. This really helps me to reach more people. We're still a baby channel here, so I'd love for you to help us grow. It's important because we're watching these films anyway. We may as well get the bang for our buck. Marvel's not paying for our therapy, so we may as well use this as a personal development exercise. Phase 4 is all about the introspection and the emotions, as we know. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. I'll be back next time on Love and Fandom on Tuesday with part 3 of the Odinsons Family Drama. And remember, you are absolutely worthy of love. See you next time.